Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our third webinar on electrification of our transportation network. I'm David Shuey, Director of Information Systems and Analytics for OKI, and I would like to introduce Mark Polsinski, OKI CEO, to provide our welcoming remarks.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining our workshop on electric vehicles. This is our third workshop, and every workshop we're more and more amazed by the participation we have from our jurisdictions, and so we thank you for joining us today. Today, our focus on this workshop is to help you and your jurisdictions as you get ready to invest in electric vehicles. We're going to provide details and directions so that you can get the best deal for your jurisdictions when it comes to moving into an electric fleet. And these details will include financials, utilities, engineering, and even vehicle considerations. In essence, our goal today is to demystify the electric vehicle selection process that you might be going through. OKI's interest in electric vehicles is neither sudden nor temporary. We've been in the space for a while. Our interest centers around the fact that EVs have zero emissions. This is very important to our society, as air quality can be dramatically improved as we switch from internal combustion engine vehicles, ICE vehicles, if you will, to electric vehicles. We are also interested in electric vehicles here at OKI because they will tend to be more automated and more connected than ICE vehicles that may be as 10 or 15 years old. That will improve the safety of folks in our region. The simple fact is that each year more and more vehicles are electrified. And this is very important to our society, and it's something that is not going to stop. It's going to continue, if you will. The simple fact is that our car makers are all in on electrification. The big three in the United States have announced that by 2030, they'll have 700 vehicles for their customers. How big a number is that? Well, currently they're less than 150. So we're going to see a 5-fold increase in options of car companies for their customers, which will drive electrification faster. In addition, it's very interesting that last month, Audi and Volkswagen announced that they are no longer going to produce internal combustion engine cars. The number of electric vehicles projected by 2030 in the United States is supposed to be about 19 million. I personally believe that that estimate is woefully short of what will happen. I think it's going to be close to double that. Whether it's 35 million or 19 million, the simple fact is when you compare either one of those to a few years ago when we had way less than 1 million electric vehicles on our roads, you can see that we have this tremendous progress to the point that we are not entering the age of electric vehicle, we're already there. And that's why we want to hold these workshops to help us all come together and figure out how it's best for our jurisdictions in this region as we operate now in this new age. So again, thank you so much for your interest and your support. And I'm going to turn it over now to Dave. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you everyone again for being here today. You know, we are in webinar mode today, which means that only our panelists are on the screen. So if you have questions during today's webinar, please utilize the Q&A feature to ask them. We will read and respond to them at the end of each presenter. Up first, I'm going to provide you with a couple of quick updates. First, Ohio EPA announced the successful grant recipients this past spring for their Level 2 charging grant program. Our region was awarded a collective $666,371, representing 40 locations consisting of 93 new charging ports. This will increase the number of public Level 2 charging locations by almost 50% and the number of ports by 53% in our Ohio counties. Installation of many of these locations has already occurred and the chargers are now active, which is very exciting news to have these get in the ground so quickly in our region. Next, I'd like to make you aware of Ohio EPA's DCFC charging station grant announced last week. There's approximately $7 million worth of funding in this round. As with the Level 2 program, the focus is on 26 priority counties in Ohio, which include Butler, Claremont, Hamilton, and Warren counties in the OKI region. Chargers on government-owned property are eligible for up to reimbursement of 100% of the cost while chargers on non-government owned property are eligible for reimbursement of up to 80%. Recipients must operate and maintain the chargers for a minimum of 5 years and submit annual usage reports. Follow the link on the screen for additional application details. Applications are due on January 31st, 2022. So pretty quick turnaround there. And the OEPA has had 2 webinars that they've had. They had one last Thursday and another one earlier today. I believe they are recording that, and that recording should be available on their website here in the next couple of days if you'd like to go back and watch that for additional guidance from OEPA. Finally, I want to make quick mention of the federal infrastructure bill. The bill was passed by the House last Friday evening. Hopefully the president will sign it here soon. Inside of that bill, we have $7.5 billion for charging stations for electric vehicles, $7.5 billion for electric buses, $65 billion to rebuild the electric grid with renewable energy and thousands of miles of new power lines. And the good news for us and how it relates to OKI and OKI funding is that STBG program is now expanding its eligibility to include installation of EV charging infrastructure and vehicle to grid infrastructure. And on the CMAQ side of things, eligibility is now extended to include the purchase of medium or heavy duty zero emission vehicles and related charging equipment. OKI will be closely monitoring the details of this bill as they become public. We anticipate additional information updates to coincide with our call for STBG and CMAQ projects in the spring of 2022. This leads me to an important point on our journey to electrification. There's not a one-size-fits-all solution for every jurisdiction or community. In order to support the electrification of our transportation system, it will take a variety of funding sources and solutions to build out our electric infrastructure for the future. The private sector and private sector investments will likely play a major role in this transition, and finding opportunities to partner with the private sector will be instrumental to our success. With that in mind, let's get to the meat of today's webinar and discuss procurement options for EV infrastructure. We are very fortunate to have a couple of local subject matter experts join us today. Our presenters are Alexis Woolard, Senior Portfolio Manager, and David Dorr, Head of Marketing from Electrata. With that, Dave and Alexis, take it away.
Well, thank you. It is so fun to be a part of this and to get to talk with all of you. We really hope this is an incredibly valuable next hour for you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And while I do that, just to tell you a little bit about Electrata. So we do everything organizations need to power electric vehicles. And so what that means is essentially after the purchase of the electric vehicles, then we come in and handle everything, including the funding of all of the infrastructure. So that is really what we were started to do, and what we're really excited about, these vehicles getting delivered here, starting slowly in 2022, but then we'll start coming much faster as we get to mid 2022, late 2022 as well, especially for light and medium duty vehicles and trucks. So just want to give you a quick landscape, a little bit about where we feel like electric vehicle infrastructure is quickly. And it's basically, we're now in a place where it's a lot like the turn of the century was with with companies getting on the internet. Back then, if a company wanted to be on the internet, they would have to buy their own servers and house it on site, and have to hire a team in order to make sure it was secure, make sure it was cooled, and all the things with the hardware and software that would go into getting their company on the internet. And so it had a lot of risks to it. It had obviously a lot of cost to it because everything was hosted on site. But then, as you know, of course, web services came along a few years later and basically said they'll handle all of that for companies. So they bought the hardware, they bought the software, they were the experts in configuration, and what companies did was basically told them how it is that they wanted how their website to work, how much load that their website could handle. And then web services said, okay, we'll take it, and they basically paid them more on that subscription model. And so we are actually sort of in that place right now where it feels a little bit like where you would have to buy your own equipment. You would have to, pay for the engineering, you have to pay for the architecture, pay for the installation, pay for the chargers, and then also have the staff and team ready to go. And but actually what Electrada's model is that we fund all of that for you. So just like web services, we take on that whole process for you. And so you can we want to make it really as easy as being able to just plug in the vehicles, and then you will pay when you charge, as well as providing predictable pricing with the electricity. And so, that's why we say a lot that powering EVs is more than just buying chargers. So we really wanted to just start off this whole this educational hour about writing RFPs, actually saying you may not need to write the RFP in the sense of where your organization might not be having any capital costs at all. A company like Electrada or other companies that have what's called electrification as a service can come along, and they're the ones that are going to fund that whole infrastructure for you and your fleets, or as you want to provide that for the citizens of your city or the residences or the commercial areas that you are building. So we want to just let you know that that actually is an option, and you can work with a lot of speed that way. And the reason why we feel like this is really, really important is because you have so many different things you have to consider as a fleet owner or when you're providing charging. This is just an overview of all the different types of things that we're going to talk about today. If you do have to write the RFP, some of the things that we want you to consider or that you're going to have to consider. But one of the big ones, of course, is what we call energy management. And energy management really is basically how you get the power to the vehicles and making sure that you have enough power to these vehicles so that there's no interruption to duty cycles and routes, and that and then how you provide for all your costs, how you can even forecast costs in the future, and also to make sure that you can still be running even if the power goes out. So this is really where a lot of what Electrada does comes in. We want to make sure that when we put together a plan for you, as well as funding and installing your whole charging infrastructure, that we put together a plan for you that you're not paying too much for power. And then also you'll be always able to measure whether you're achieving your sustainability goals, your ESG goals. Particularly if you also want to incorporate some on-site solar and power storage. Again, energy management is a big part of that. Again, this providing these predictable pricing. Obviously, just obviously what happened in Texas earlier this year, and now that was a very extreme case, of course, but we know that the price of electricity can vary wildly. And so we want to make sure that that's not a part of your fleet situation, and that it's something you can plan for, and it can be predictable for you. And then, of course, we want to keep you driving when the power goes out. So that's really where Electrada comes in. And these are the types of things now that we are going to talk about in the RFP. Obviously, chargers are going to be a big part of it, but we are going to want to help you navigate some of these complexities, particularly with utilities, because it's not just like buying a gas pump, or fuel cards or whatever it might be in your situation. There is a lot there to consider. So with that, I want to skip it over here to Alexis. She's going to come over here to this chair as well, and she's going to lead you through some different stories, some people, some organizations that have already RFP'd, and she's going to lead the rest of some of the details if an RFP is something that you have to do. So thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks, Dave and Mark, for having us here today. And again, I'm Alexis Woolard. I'm the Senior Portfolio Manager for Electrada. So I primarily am the main point person between our site hosts partners. That can be in the residential, the public, the workplace, and especially the commercial fleet segments of the various aspects of getting organizations fully electrified with their vehicles. So immediate considerations for EV charging, the big things that organizations are going to have to grapple with as they're considering maybe going with the RFP approach, or maybe they know they're going to be coming across, funding through the infrastructure bill or similar regional funding mechanisms. And how do we be prescriptive enough on how we decide the specifications for what charging we need, how much charging, where that charging is located. So primarily, these main bullets here are to describe what do you initially need to think about. So budget, obviously, when we approach, especially in the public segment, typically we run across two points of view. Either you have a budget in mind, you've set aside a budget, or maybe you're bringing on all electric vehicles over the next 5-10 years. So you have a very specific budget in mind. Or you're an organization that you have sustainability goals, you have internal organizational goals where you want to add more green infrastructure and clean mobility options that are reliable and robust for your organization, but you don't have a budget and you don't really know where to start. The other consideration is ownership. Do you want to take on another asset to manage? A lot of the points that Dave was bringing up before, thinking about energy management, ongoing maintenance, operations, making sure that those chargers are reliable for your organization. Charging equipment and network criteria. You'll hear a lot of buzzwords around in the industry about having a reliable network, and what does that really mean? So part of what we do here at Electrata is we right size specifically for your organization. You might not need 10 DC fast chargers at your headquarters. Maybe, based on your specific duty cycle of your vehicles, you might need a combination of level 2 and fast charging to meet the actual needs of your charging cycles. Operations and maintenance, obviously, especially with public organizations, this is a huge consideration. Not only do you have to think about staff time to operate and maintain the chargers at your facility, but just that ongoing capital expense. And that's somewhere where we, as an organization that capitalizes and funds everything revolving the infrastructure, can come into play and help you offset those additional capital costs. And then lastly, other considerations as far as, do you want to introduce fleet management tools, renewable options, all these different considerations that kind of were in that bubble slide that Dave mentioned. Where do you even start? So just to reintroduce the concept of what is the RFP process versus charging as a service. Now, obviously, on this webinar, we have a lot of public entities, and I know you all are very familiar with how the RFP process works. So I won't, go into detail about how you assemble an RFP from the paperwork side of things. I think we've got that covered here. But specifically related to thinking about EV charging for your organization, what do you need to consider as you're putting that RFP together? And what do you want to be responsible for versus what are you seeking out in a worthwhile vendor that you end up selecting? These are not all inclusive. These are just some of the main areas what we have seen in recent examples that we think are important to have well-defined in an RFP that you are presenting to the public. So first, inclusion goals. If you have internal inclusion goals as far as small or minority-owned or local-owned businesses to include in your RFP, what level of experience are you looking for? Now, this can be kind of tricky. Electrata has only been in operations for less than 2 years. So oftentimes, when you're asking for specific experience, what are you actually asking for? Are you looking for depth and breadth of experience or specific to your organizational needs? Use case definition, location criteria. You may have locations in mind, but we have found that the more open you can be to allowing the bidders to respond to the loose parameters of location, that often helps you get more quality results and feedback from the bidders. Defined budget, as I mentioned before, you may or may not have a defined budget, or you might simply state, we're looking for the lowest cost option or a no cost option even. Equipment specifications, again, I think it would be most beneficial to go in it with open open eyes because we know that technology is ever improving, and rely on your subject matter experts that are bidding on the RFP to suggest what types of equipment. Now, you may be specifically looking for level 2 versus fast charging, so as detailed as you want to be in that regard. And then specifically defining if you as the site host or as the bidder, who's going to handle that utility coordination. Maybe you in-house already have somebody who has a great relationship, or you have a great relationship with the local utility and you want to take on that coordination, or are you expecting your bidder to take that on? Obviously, installation, operations, and maintenance are the 3 biggest areas. Being as clear in what you're asking the RFP for. If you want a turnkey service, you should state that in the RFP. Or maybe you're only looking for equipment and you have the wherewithal in your organization to take on the installation, operations, and maintenance. So just be as prescriptive as possible. The ability to streamline funding sources and budget. So maybe you have, again, a set aside budget, or you're looking to maybe go across different organizations or combine budgets to help facilitate getting as many bidders as possible. And then your selection criteria. How are you weighting all these different factors across who your selected bidder is going to be? Versus on the other side here, we have what we call charging as a service, and what you hear in the industry often called charging as a service. Basically, what that means is it's turnkey, it's low risk. You're having somebody come in as a vendor and providing everything that you need to get the outcome for your electric vehicle charging needs for your organization. So everything is very tailored to exactly what is the best fit for your organization. Even if you don't know what those parameters are on the left, you can bring in a turnkey service provider or vendor to help you better define and almost consult on those very specific needs, including making an informed decision on equipment and network, and providing the lowest or no cost option for the site host. Oftentimes what we see is that when groups are asking for charging as a service, what they're really ideally looking for is that turnkey solution that is the lowest and no cost option. And oftentimes, because you have a partner or vendor who's coming in, providing all this infrastructure, taking on the costs and the risk, just being aware that your selected bidder is going to likely ask for a long-term partnership and contract. Like, we know that, you know, we're still especially in this region, in the earlier stages of adoption. So you're planning, your future planning, you want to bring in a teammate and a partner who is going to help you for the long run, and making sure you always have the best solution that is reliable. So just again, not to, I know most of you out here have probably assembled many RFPs before. So your typical components, we've kind of gone over each of these on the last slide. I wanted to specifically also get into 3 examples. 2 of these are local examples that Electrata actually participated in, and 1 third example for reference. We specifically looked at these examples because they both were had interesting outcomes as far as our participation, and really kind of looking through how these RFPs were assembled and what the site host had in mind when they were putting them together. And I know some of our partners are on this webinar today, so just want to say hi and thank you for being a great partner and helping us bring the solution that we're going to talk about here. So the first one is Hamilton County Level 2 public charging. This was issued, all 3 of these are going to be recent examples. So this RFP was issued in January of this year. Electrata was selected as the winning bidder early spring this year. It was issued by Hamilton County Department of Stadia and Parking. Some of their organizational goals, again, this is not exhaustive, just wanted to highlight some of these. They did ask for 5% small business enterprise participation, and they were really looking for a turnkey, low or no cost option. More specifically, Hamilton County was also looking for a 5-year contract at 5 different facilities for a total of 18 level 2 charging ports. They kept it open, no specific equipment vendor, but having a networked, reliable solution was important. Looking for fee charging, so a way to share in potential revenue upsides, and also having different methods for customers to be able to pay and use the charging stations, and keeping it open to the public. They wanted it to be implemented in a timeline from a pretty quick timeline from 120 days from award. And the bidder was to include the main three, again, installation, operations, and maintenance at low or no cost. And then ongoing customer service and scheduled maintenance plan. And the way that the RFP was awarded or weighted against was the obviously completeness, ability to deliver at low or no cost option, and ability to adhere to the timeline. So just wanted to show some outcomes that, like I said, this RFP was awarded and we got under contract earlier this spring. And at the 4 locations you see here, the East Garage, the new West End Garage, the Central Riverfront South and Central Riverfront North Garage, these were all deployed and implemented well within that 120-day timeline that the county was looking for, and they're all fully operational as of today. So we're very happy to be in partnership with Hamilton County, and they've been a great partner to help us facilitate bringing more public charging to Hamilton County. The second example, just wanted to run through quickly, was the ODOT and Ohio Department of Natural Resources Level 2 charging RFP that was issued last summer. Was due in September of 2020, and I believe was awarded in early 2021. Now this was assembled based on some of the outcomes from a Drive Ohio study, but also in conjunction with the Ohio EPA Level 2 charging grant specification. So it was a sort of a hybrid of ODOT and ODNR saw a need to bring additional public charging across their facilities, but also coupling that with the available funding opportunity through Ohio EPA. There was the opportunity for $7,500 per dual port installation and $15,000 for 4-port installations through that Diesel Mitigation Trust Fund grant. And again, similar specifications that you saw from Hamilton County, a 5-year contract, specific locations, open to equipment and vendor, fee charging, relatively fast timeline within 24 months. And then again, looking for somebody that's going to handle installation, operations, and maintenance, ongoing customer service and scheduled maintenance plans as well. So obviously a strong emphasis on reliability and implementation and being able to come in and maximize that funding that was available for the sites. Just to highlight 2 of the examples of the outcomes that Electrada participated in. On the left of your screen, we have the Houston Woods Lodge parking that had 2 dual port stations for 4 ports total, and then Caesars Creek State Park on the right. And then the last example, just wanted to cover, this was not an example that Electrada participated in, but just to kind of show you how across the board, the RFPs and RFIs that we're seeing this year and going into the new year, a lot of similar parallels between what is being asked of the bidders. This is the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, MPCA. They issued an RFP on a similar timeline as the OEPA Level 2 charging and the ODOT ODNR charging RFPs, and deadline was earlier this year. Obviously, their objectives were to increase public charging across Minnesota and really targeting to reduce emissions and contribute to healthier environments in the most vulnerable populations served by the MPCA. Exactly the same as the ODOT RFP, where it was $7,500 per dual port and $15,000 for 4-port installation. And this was also, they did receive funding also from the Diesel Mitigation Trust Fund to facilitate this public charging RFP. Their specifications, obviously specific locations. There was a match requirement from the bidders, a larger percentage if it was a workplace charging location versus a smaller 20% commitment for public charging locations. Preference for projects with renewable energy components. So this is a little bit different than what we saw in the prior 2 examples, really emphasizing how can you bring the big picture of not only providing clean charging, but also on a renewable source of energy. And then again, very similar specifications with installation, operations, maintenance, customer service, and ongoing maintenance. MPCA, one other thing to know is they really did emphasize, just like with the OEPA Level 2 charging, what are the most vulnerable areas that really, have poor air quality and looking to bring clean mobility options as soon as possible in these underserved areas. And then another charging as a service example that we wanted to highlight that was another Electrata partnership was with Northern Kentucky University. So another partner in our OKI region here. NKU did want to add charging stations at a parking lot near their newly constructed residence hall. They knew they wanted to bring in the charging stations, but they were really strapped from the financial side with no budget to deploy and meet the goals they had of bringing charging on campus. Electrata worked very closely with Northern Kentucky University's procurement office to discuss, what about this turnkey solution where it's no cost to the university. So bringing in all of the capital, all of the equipment, installation, operations, committing to that 10-year contract agreement where Electrata will continue to serve the chargers and expand across campus so that NKU is able to bring their chargers to the scale and to the level to meet the needs of their students, staff, and faculty. The end result of this was we did deliver 2 dual level 2 charging stations in time for the new residence hall to open in the fall, just a month or so ago. And additionally, now we're continuing to partner with NKU to bring different zones of charging available across campus and continuing to implement through the end of this year and into next year. So this was a really great use case example where the university had specific goals in mind, but didn't have the budget and could work together with a partner like Electrata to meet their needs and get to scale as far as their charging needs. And just to kind of wrap up some of the best practices and really, advice that we can say just from experience of being a bidder, we know that, and you all very well know that communication and collaboration is key. We encourage organizations to work together to discuss collective needs. Additionally, if you have the ability to combine contracts or include umbrella language to allow for similar organizations to tap into, maybe you've already issued an RFP and selected a vendor, giving organizations the options to utilize the same vendors that you have already vetted through your own RFP process. Also encouraging groups to team up on technical assistance. Obviously, across the different organizations, you may have different subject matter experts. So how can you pull your resources together, maybe within the RFP writing itself, if you're going to pursue that route? If you're able to combine resources, study different specifications, learn more about charging equipment, et cetera. And then just making it a collaborative process to ensure that your strategies are aligned and you're not duplicating efforts. Because obviously, if very similar organizations have RFPs out at the same time, you're going to bidders are going to self-select and go with the opportunities that make the most sense for them individually. And with that, we wanted to open it back up for questions. I think we have a couple. Dave, do you want to lead the question and answer?
Yeah, thank you, Alexis, and thank you, Dave. Great presentation, great information. Hopefully be very helpful for our members that are on the line here today. So we'll go ahead and jump in. We do have a couple questions. If you have additional questions while we're reading these and answering these, please go ahead and use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen to type those in, and we'll try to get everybody answered. One of the first questions we had was, will this webinar be available for download? If so, where can I find it? We will take and we're going to process this video and we're going to throw it up on the OKI YouTube channel. And we hope to have that up by the end of the week. So check out YouTube OKI and we'll have that for you by the end of the week. Next question is, what is the current kilowatt hour rate to charge an EV, which I'm assuming is the same as the regular kilowatt hour per charge for electricity, if that's what we're looking for, if this is what it costs or what the wholesale cost is or what the retail is in terms of what Electrata charges. Maybe you guys want to answer it both ways.
Sure. So when we look at it, we typically our rates in public charging and workplace and across our different segments, we do charge per kilowatt hour. So we're really only ever charging for the direct energy consumed. And obviously, just to kind of give a quick example, your utility provider has their rate of electricity, say it's 10 cents per kilowatt hour. What we're seeing in the market, especially in this region, is anywhere from, for the market rate of charging, anywhere from 25 cents to 50 cents per kilowatt hour, which it does depend on the make model of your vehicle, your battery state when you start charging, and your battery capacity. However, somewhere between $1.75 and $2 per hour is what that usually equates to. So that margin between what the utility charges and what somebody like Electrata or a similar provider would charge, say it's 30 cents per kilowatt hour on the consumer side. So 10 cents from your utility, that 20-cent margin is where, we especially recoup our capital costs for the charging stations and the operations and maintenance and all the operational fees that go within that. Is that anything? Did I miss anything there?
Nope, that was great. I mean, I would just say, just like a lot of questions with a lot of this will be, obviously, it depends on where you live, time of day, but obviously the variability of electricity, what you're actually charged to get it from the utility is going to depend your location. Again, like I said, time of day. It doesn't, we're used to gas changing, well, consumers are used to it, changing, kind of weekly or every few days, that kind of thing. But electricity is a lot different. It can change wildly even throughout the day. So particularly when it depends on load, and obviously what it takes even to deliver that electricity to your charger. So that's where it's really important to consider the ability to procure predictable pricing for, especially if you're going to be doing this infrastructure service for a fleet. And then particularly as well, especially with some of the infrastructure bill, the money that's available now for solar, for on-site battery storage. There's a lot of opportunities even then, for you to put that as a part of your infrastructure, which is going to, of course, then bring your cost of electricity down quite a bit. So that's a big thing you want to definitely consider in the partner that you choose for that, so that you are not paying too much for electricity, charging at the wrong times,
right.
All that kind of thing. So,
and that's, as Dave mentioned, that's especially something we look at from the fleet side for organizations. We'll look at everything from the time of day charging, the duty cycle of the vehicle, how much mileage the vehicles are going to have per day, per week, per year. How do you avoid those demand charges of charging during peak hours? So we'll model all that internally to come up with a predictable total cost of goods for our fleet partners, so that how does that stack up against what you're currently paying for internal combustion fleet, and where are you going to see those cost savings, and how soon are you going to realize those cost savings?
Great, thank you. Next question, can the charging stations be powered by solar?
There are definitely options to power the charging stations by solar. An example that we have is we have a level 2 charging at the Cincinnati Zoo. So that's more of an indirect being powered by solar energy, where the zoo has a solar array that ties back into their electrical panel and infrastructure on the back end. And then the chargers are then tied into the panel that has a partially renewable source. So there's a lot of options as far as being able to, if you're planning an array and you want to build the charging stations right into the solar panels, or is it more of how are you're offsetting your total emissions with solar and building in enough storage that can then power the infrastructure that you're installing on site.
But if someone wanted a standalone solar to EV charger, they'd probably have to have a large battery with that. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so. There are options, and I don't believe we've installed any that directly have solar on them, but there are options in the market that groups could have, especially I think on the DC side.
And if you have particular ESG goals around wanting it to be 100% sustainable energy, wind or solar, our team, especially, and others can buy electricity from those sources as well to get it to your site.
And what we say is we're tech agnostic, where we don't specify a particular equipment with all of our installations. We really, look to our site host partners. What are their goals? What are their specific needs? If they want to have something that has direct solar embedded in the charger, that's something that we'll consider as we're developing a particular solution.
Great, thank you. Next question. What kind of infrastructure support is available to the end user? As an example, legacy facilities that require substantial electrical upgrades to be able to support the amperage requirements for EV charging.
That is a great question. And I, just from experience of the ports that we've deployed over the last year and a half, that is a big roadblock with agencies, is that, these are often as built infrastructure. Maybe you are limited from bringing in additional power to the site. There are options, for example, with your local utilities, depending on where you're located, where if you are looking to upgrade a transformer or bring in a new transformer to your site, there's usually a percentage share or co-investment from the utility, knowing what type of infrastructure you're going to be putting in place and generating more electricity from the utility. So it is dependent kind of on where you're located, but I know a lot of times it can be like a 60-40 split where the installer pays 60% for the infrastructure and then pays the utility for the 40%. And again, that does vary on where you're located and the size and type of infrastructure upgrade you're looking for.
Great, thank you. That's all of our questions. I did have one more, and if you have additional questions, go ahead and type them in the Q&A, and we'll get them answered here for you. My question for you guys revolves around the specifications in the RFP, and you touched on this briefly, but my question to you, is there a way to future-proof some of the tech? We've really seen charging speeds here over the last couple of years expand exponentially in terms of what EVs can take now. Is there a way to future-proof that in someone's RFP so that is there an easy upgrade or something that in 3 or 4 years from now that will allow them to sort of have the latest tech?
That is a good question. So one of the things that when we look at a site from a future proofing standpoint, and maybe what organizations could look at putting the RFPs together, is maybe specifying locations and quantities of chargers. If just from your internal knowledge of where your electrical drops are, and from the technical feasibility standpoint of where the best locations for the charging, and knowing that, based on the plans of your organization over time, that particular location isn't going to be built upon or changed and not be available for future, making specifications for either capacity on the panel, bringing in new capacity, or also stubbing and conduit for future. So even if the technology is changing, you can kind of future-proof by building in kind of the rough backbones infrastructure early on in the project. We do that a lot just from even when it's not a public or an RFP specification, when we're looking at a site and maybe right now, the embedded demand at the site only calls for 4 or 6 charging stations, we'll always build in and kind of max out reserve space on the panel and build in additional conduit to allow for easy expansion, because, breaking ground once, it's never going to be cheaper than the first time you do it. So as much as that back-end infrastructure as you can include or specify or request in your RFP, the better. So
conduit under large parking lots is your best friend then?
Yes. Especially maybe you have long-term development plans at your organization, and that a new parking lot or something is going to change. If you can think about getting that infrastructure in early, it always makes it easier down the road. But luckily, if you decide to pick a turnkey provider like Electrata, then we help you tackle some of those big questions and think about that future planning up front.
Great. Well, that appears to be the end of our questions for today. So we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here. Again, Alexis and Dave from Electrata, we really appreciate your time and your expertise today. I'm sure that if people are interested in getting in touch with you, that they can go to the Electrata website and contact you through the website if they have additional questions. And again, here at OKI, thanks Mark Polsinski for our opening today. We will continue to be in contact with our jurisdictions as we get more information on additional funding opportunities. We'll probably have a couple more of these webinars in the future as well. So for that, we again thank you and have a great day, everyone.